advance and fulfill some of the promises that we made together with the Southside plan. So one of the big things we did immediately after the Southside plan was work on Churchill Park, right? And I've seen those improvements. And that is much more than what you see in the park itself. There was a ton of infrastructure issues to work on in the neighborhood. So the city has invested a lot in making sure that the infrastructure is put underneath the roadways so we could enable more housing to be built on some of the city-owned properties that are around Churchill Park. And that's really what we're at the table with today. We've heard the call from across the city that we need more housing, and specifically in the South Side, that we need more housing. We know the neighborhood is tight-knit, multi-generational, very interested in aging in place and seeing the character of the neighborhood continue. For a lot of years, the city bought properties that were in really, really bad shape, just not quality housing, and used demolition dollars to make sure those were cleared, which is an improvement. But also then you see vacant lots sitting there thinking, would be something, right? I wish there was more opportunities for people to live. So you're going to hear today the market, a little bit about demand and what we know about the incomes of the city and the type of housing that might be feasible. We're going to specifically facilitate a conversation about housing types that could go on this land around Churchill Park that the city owns. Because we own the land, we have some more leverage on being able to attract development and the kind of development. But we don't want to sit in the office and make decisions about that. We want to be with you in community, making decisions about what that looks like and how it comes to bear. So that's why we're doing this process. We have these focus areas because of the city-owned land, and Southside is one of those focus areas. So I'm going to hand it again. I'm Erin Blair. I lead the planning and zoning division. So if we hadn't had the opportunity to have a conversation, please don't be shy to reach out to me. I'm very interested to hear from you and what you're passionate about and how I might be able to help publish thoughts that you think are important. So thanks for coming. Your time is valuable and really appreciate spending some with us. And I'm going to hand it over to Adam Cook. He's leading on the consultant team. So his team are planners and urban designers and with expertise that will really help us advance this project. So thank you so much. And I'll hand it over to Adam.
Great. Thank you, Erin. And thank you, everyone, for coming out this morning on such a beautiful morning, spending a little time with us. We appreciate it more than you know. It's great to have so many neighbors just sitting around the table. And hopefully most of today is interactive and conversation. We have a couple of kind of initial things to present here to kind of set the stage. I think Erin did a great job explaining, kind of why we're here. And we can kind of, there we go. Once I get used to this mouse wheel, kind of go through our agenda today. So we're going to introduce ourselves, a little bit about the project. This is one component of a citywide project that's going to go on over the next year called the Housing Development Accelerator. We'll talk a little bit about that, what our goals are for today. We're going to talk about the housing market, both citywide and specifically here on the South Side. And then we're going to get into really the fun part. Hopefully you find it the fun part. It's the visioning exercise, where we're really going to have a conversation. And my colleague, Rick, who we'll talk about more in a minute, it's going to be over there, and you're going to see smoke rising from those pens and markers. And he's going to put our conversation into pictures in real time as we're talking. So first things first, introductions. We are OHM advisors, and my colleague Delia and Rick and myself are out of our Columbus office, but we're the community advancement firm. So we do a lot of different things, but we all get up in the morning for one reason, and that's to make communities better places, not just for the people who live there today, but for future generations. And so that means in our case, we do planning, we do landscape architecture and urban design. We also have engineers. We also have architects, all of the different disciplines that make communities better places under one roof. That's our mission at OHM Advisors. As you can see, we've got offices kind of expanding all up and down that band of the country. We were founded in Michigan. Columbus is our main studio for what we call our place team, which is planning, landscape architecture, and urban design. But you can see where some of our other locations are. And we work in communities large and small all throughout this region. But really, Ohio Michigan, Midwest, our firm is rooted really in these communities and really understand, kind of how these communities are put together. We're all Midwesterners here on this team, and we're proud to be that way. And so, as Aaron mentioned, my name is Adam Cook. I'm the project manager with OHM, and I'm also a planner at OHM. Rick Fay is our landscape architect and urban designer. And Delia Houston over there, it says planner and graphic designer. Really, Delia is wearing about 20 hats. She's doing all the logistics. All of these beautiful placemats that you have, all of the graphics that you see, that's all Delia's handiwork. And she's absolutely invaluable member of our team, just doing everything else. And so we appreciate that. Project overview. So Housing Development Accelerator. Overall purpose, right? It's to expand housing options and strengthen neighborhoods throughout the city. We're looking at 3 focus areas very specifically. So South Side, yesterday we did 2 of these sessions, one surrounding Cold Creek and then one surrounding the former GNC boundary site. And you can see that map on that easel kind of shows where those 3 sites are in the city. But we are looking also citywide because we want to identify opportunities for housing types, housing formats that really have not been added to the city's housing stock over the last 40, 50 years or so. And we want to encourage development of those new housing types. So that includes a citywide pattern book that will come out later, more toward the end of this process. It includes researching what adjustments we can make to zoning, because a lot of cities' zoning rules were established decades ago and really don't meet the needs of where the housing market is today. So if you can kind of see the 4 phases of the project, investigate. There's a lot of research that goes into this. We had a market analyst do a housing study for the city, and then also to look at our 3 focus areas more in depth. And I'll present a couple results from that so you can kind of get a picture of where our housing market is. Of course, engage. This is part of that engage component. Our visioning workshop today, and then there's going to be a second set of workshops in a couple of months. We're going to ask you to come out of your hibernation in hopefully February and come back and meet with us again to do a little bit of refining on the results of the workshop today. And there's also going to be a citywide online survey that will be taking place over the next few months as well. What we want to come out of that are visualizations for each of those focus areas. After having this conversation, understanding your experiences, your lived experiences, in this case, in the South Side, we want to try and visualize what housing types might be most appropriate on those sites surrounding Churchwell Park. And we want to visualize those. We want to come back. We want to work through that and pin them up to a wall and really have you say, what did we get right? We get this 95% right. We got that 100% right. Maybe we got that 80% right. And we can tweak that. And we can tweak that to a point where we can come out with something called a developer request for qualifications. And I've got a sample of one of those. It's actually sitting right on the top of that stack of documents on the table. Feel free to kind of take a look at that and pass that around. That's an example of one for a site up near Flint, Michigan, but it gives you an idea of what that final document looks like. It's really a marketing piece for somebody that may want to come in and take ownership of those city-owned lots. And it has in there a concept, design concept, a development concept, and vision sourced from the neighbors that says, this is where we see the future of our neighborhood. This is what we would like to see in our neighborhood. In about 85, 90% of cases, a city that owns land like this, they will just put out something called a developer RFP. It has a map like that, and it says, hey, we own these parcels. Here's what the zoning says. Buy them from us and build what you want. And we're turning that around. We're flipping the script on that. We're coming up with the vision. We're doing some of the due diligence, meaning all of the research, number crunching that a developer might have to do, making the case as to why that would be a sound investment, and then putting that out to the development community, saying you have to prove to us, you have to make a case to us that you can, create, you have the capability to create and build what the community's vision is. And so then lastly, in the finalized phase, We have those developer RFQs. I mentioned a citywide pattern book. Pattern book is kind of a fancy term for almost like a picture book. Cities were doing pattern books actually for hundreds and hundreds of years. We came up with kind of zoning really more recently, more in the last 120 or so years. And if you've ever looked at the city's zoning ordinance, you'll see that there's a lot of text in there. There's a lot of numbers in there and tables and things like that. It's a very technical document. And it's not very easy to read, even for the people that have to use it every day, like nerds like us. It's actually not very easy to read. There are no pictures in there. A pattern book actually creates images, pictures, does put some numbers in there, some dimensions that shows what new housing would look like, depending on the neighborhood, that's contextually appropriate, that fits in with the feel, the character, that's really, feels like it's Sandusky and not like it's just a generic product that was developed based on a couple of numbers and a couple of random dimensions. And then, as I said, we want to make sure that we can update the zoning, which is what you can do by law, or you can build to make sure that those housing types can easily get approved and in time. And so our roles and responsibilities. So as stakeholders, as neighbors, we need you. We need your insight. We need your local perspectives. We need your on-the-ground knowledge, your lived experiences. You understand this neighborhood. You understand Southside, Churchwell Park, MacArthur Park better than we do, better than we ever will, because these are your lived experiences. We need you to help shape the visions. So as we talk, as we kind of focus group this, and as Rick starts to draw, we're going to hopefully come out of today with some sketches that we can literally pin up to the wall, like we're, in an architecture studio, and talk about them and critique them. And then we're going to take those back over the next couple of months, and we're really going to refine them and then bring them back to you in February to make sure they're really representative of the types of development that you'd like to see on those sites. And so I kind of introduced the 3 sites there. And so that's really what our goal is for today. After kind of going through a little bit of what we uncovered in the research phase, we want to discuss those design parameters. So that's kind of a, fancy word, but by parameters, we kind of mean the sandbox. If you think about when you want to let your kids play and make a mess, you don't just let them do that anywhere. You give them a sandbox, right? You give them guardrails. And that's really what we mean by design parameters. Those are kind of guardrails that we want to see. And we want to make sure that housing kind of fits within those design guardrails. So we'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that as we move toward creating that draft scenario. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we do have some kind of interesting things that we uncovered about Sandusky's housing market. We thought would be good kind of food for thought, starting points. And so some of these numbers on here may surprise you. Some of them you might say, "Oh, that's exactly what I would have guessed." This is common sense. You just look at our kind of community snapshot. Sandusky's about 25,000 people, roughly. Its median household income is a little bit below statewide. So we're at about 48,000, whereas statewide, we're looking at 70,000. But again, Ohio's a big state, big population, about 12 million people, and a lot of different types of communities. One of the most diverse states in the country, actually, in terms of just the range of communities. 3 giant metro areas, a bunch of smaller cities, a bunch of mid-sized regional towns. So, it makes sense that median income would be a little bit higher. We look at typical home values. Typical home value, it's a little bit different way of calculating it than median home value. It basically takes out the really low numbers and it takes out the really high numbers to get kind of a more accurate measure based on the types of homes most people are buying. Most people are not buying, 12-bedroom mansions. And we know that those do exist in the state or on the market all the time. So we want to kind of take the high end and the low end out of that when we calculate it to get a little bit closer number to what's realistic. And so the typical home value in the city, not just in Southside, but throughout the entire city of Sandusky, is $146,000 as of this year. Statewide, that number is higher than that. It's $240,000. Median rent citywide, and we don't have a statewide number to compare for this, but median rent citywide in Sandusky is about $1,000 a month. So, if you were to line up everybody's rental unit and chart that, half of those rents would fall below $1,000, half of them would fall above $1,000.
And that's for one bedroom. Excuse me.
Oh, that's okay.
Is that the one bedroom?
That's for anything that's for rent. So it could be, a 3-bedroom house for rent. It could be a 1-bedroom
I
apartment.
ain't saying that.
I'm sorry, you are not.
No. They're like 12 or more. 12 is 15.
A quick question.
Yeah,
Are these figures for Sandusky only or Erie County?
they're for Sandusky.
Okay.
They're for Sandusky.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can double check that, Brent. I mean, I think that again, when we're looking at a median, that number is going to be a little bit lower than an average. If we're to compute an average, that number would definitely go up because all of those higher rent properties would skew that number a little bit higher. It's a little bit different calculation. So maybe when we come back, we'll look at the median, we'll look at the average, and try to get a little bit clearer sense of what that is.
One other thing you said was the blocks. Somebody owning the blocks. What did you mean by that?
Sure. If you look, and I'm going to have this map up on our screen too.
Okay.
It's a little easier to see, but we've got it up there on that board. So there are a number of parcels in that neighborhood, the McGarkin Park neighborhood, that the city currently owns. And they've taken ownership of them over, Aaron, I don't know how many years.
It was like a 10-year strategy.
About 10 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
How would they take it? Was it through land bank or was it through federal funds?
A lot of them was land bank processes and then through the county land bank demolition funds. And they're held by the city land bank currently. So in order for a developer to build on them, there would be a land transfer at some point that whoever was building would own whatever number of parcels is what that agreement would look like.
Some of them were deed foreclosures, some of deed and no foreclosures, some of them sold directly to the city. There's a variety of methods.
Yeah. And so those are basically, as you drive around that neighborhood, those are basically the parcels that are vacant for you, ready to be built.
Are you ready for questions or I should wait?
I think what we want to do is kind of like have most of this day be discussion where we can get all of our thoughts just put out there on the table. I'll take one question and finish mine.
I don't know. OMH that you are a part of.
Yeah.
Are you focusing on MacArthur Park or MacArthur Park and the South Side?
It's just, so our focus area is just what you see up on that board, right? Which is what we would call the MacArthur Park neighborhood.
Okay.
We're specifically just looking at the parcels highlighted here.
Okay.
So we understand that there's like the South Side plan. We're going to be, leading on that, looking at it, and then also the information that you guys share with us today. But our focus on this project is within Southside is just these parcels. Then the larger project is we have these other focus areas that you see on this board.
Mhm.
And then there's, as earlier said, that there's going to be a pattern book. So there's like this large project that we're involved in, and then there's a little separate, niches of the project. Yeah. And then today we're just focusing on these parcels for the South Side.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
It's in the community snapshot. Did you look at the income? I see the median income, but did you look at the levels? What level may be considered poor? What level is considered median? What level is considered within the city limits?
We did. And I'm going to get into that
Okay.
in just a second. But
And also, in migration, that 15% that moved into the city. Did you look at migration who moved out of the city?
so based on the data we have, right, migration is a little complicated because every single day, somebody's moving in, somebody's moving out, somebody's moving between places in the city. And they're doing that every day. So when we looked at migration data, we took it from the census. And of course, over the last 5 or 6 weeks, we haven't been able to access the census. So this was kind of our first pass at it. And we kind of have a general idea that about 15% of Sandusky's population today, right now, maybe 14, maybe 16, but somewhere around there, moved at some point within the last year, meaning they moved from somewhere else. Could have been California, could have been Idaho, or could have been the next county over into Sandusky, or they moved from one place to another within Sandusky.
Okay.
So that's the, what's the official program name where we get that from the census? Is it just the ACS or that does?
The ACS, yeah. So it's
That's the one that does movership data.
yes, it's the county. It's county data. It's county data. Specifically, it's new ownership of housing. So when they go to do, every year when they do the tax, they take information of new ownership or, someone's new address. What's difficult is because of the way they do it, of it's who's new, we can't really understand, who left, because it's just, we don't know where they went, but it's who came in, who's new, and what's different.
So the condom process.
Yes, it's the American Community Survey. So it's across the United States, the census, and then they break it down between counties. When we come back, we can try and get more information to see. This is just for relaying information that the American Community Surveys provide us.
Yeah, it's just food for thought.
And the reason the folks is, these 3 areas are deep and and maybe I need that's a city that are these the areas in which the city owned property.
Yeah, that's the largest concentration of city-owned property, so we have more leverage on what the outcome for development
For these 3 areas.
in those 3 areas.
Thank
The pattern book that's citywide will help guide private development on private land or future site development. But because the city has land in these 3 areas, that's why we're focusing there.
Okay. Anyway, the 15% number is really just a means for comparison. We did the same data dive for the whole metro around Sandusky, and that was 10%. And then we did it for the whole state of Ohio, which is 12%. So I think the key takeaway is simply that Sandusky just has a higher rate of demand, maybe people moving in, kind of movement of the population than its metro area or than the state, which means it has a little bit more robust housing market. And so I want to just kind of walk through some of these charts, and I don't, there's a lot to take in. We can send these to you after the fact, but what this shows is kind of the overall housing market kind of broken down by income bracket and by what type of housing has been built, when it's been built, and who it's been priced for. So if you go all the way down to the bottom right-hand corner, you see a big red bar that says 70%. Okay. You take a look at that and you work your way back up to the top. It says for sale listings for units built after 2010. And then if you work all the way over to the left, you'll see $424,000 of greater sales price. And then you'll see that translates into about $2,600 a month rent, $114,000 income. What that means is 70% in that case of the for sale houses built after 2010, so relatively new houses, have been built and they've sold for a sales price above $424,000. What that means is to realistically afford that. When we talk about housing affordability, generally we're thinking roughly 30%, 33% of somebody's monthly income should go to their housing costs for that to be considered affordable, or less than that ideally, but 33%. You would need to be making over $114,000, right, to realistically afford one of those newer build houses. Now I'll show you kind of the same thing. If you see a big green bar, they're kind of in the middle of the chart up towards the top. And it's a little hard on the screen to read the numbers in that bar, but it says 59%. Okay, so doing the same kind of reading, you can look up and it says all rental asking prices. And then if you move all the way over to the left, you'll see $106,000 to $212,000 sales price, $700 to $1,400 rent, and about $28,000 to $57,000 in income. And so that means if we look at just rental prices within the city, about 59% of the units for rent, okay, are priced such that someone making between $28,000 and about $57,000 could reasonably afford that, based on that. So you can do that for each one of those colored bars and get a sense of, okay, are we, where are we in terms of asking prices? Where are we in terms of for sale prices? And, what segment of Sandusky's population, based on their income, would be able to afford one of those products. Another way to look at it is demand. So this is almost kind of like supply broken down into what does our housing supply look like? How is it priced, either for sale or for rent? And then who can afford that? The other thing you look at is demand. And so the way to read this chart is to kind of look for those squares that are colored in blue. And the deeper the blue color means the more demand there is for that type of product. So, for example, you see that really dark blue square kind of in the upper right-hand corner, and there's a number 150 in there. So if you go up to the top, it says rent 2-bedroom. And if you go over to the left from that square, again, you're in that bracket of $28,000 to $57,000 in income and about $700 to $1,400 in rent. So what that 150 means is Sandusky's market could reasonably support for the next 5 years about 150 rental units per year, okay, that have 2 bedrooms. Regardless of what type of building they're in, they have 2 bedrooms and they could be priced at $700 to $1,400 a month for rent. So, for example, if I'm a developer, if I can figure out how to build something and get it into that price point and I have 2 bedrooms, I have a reasonable certainty that I'm going to have a nice line, of 150 people that really are going to be interested in renting that out. It's not going to sit empty, and I'm going to keep my cash flow going, and I'm going to make money on my investment. And you can again do that for all of those different combinations. Rentals of 0 to 1 bedroom, rentals of 3 bedroom. And then over the left too, we've got for sale units. But you can see really where the deepest demand is in terms of number of units is in that rental market. So a 0 or 1 bedroom, when you think of the 0 bedroom, that's something like a studio type of unit or a 1-bedroom unit. There's a 113 in that square. And those would be priced at below $716 a month, right? That shows that there's a lack of product like that for that income bracket in the Sandusky market. So that if someone can figure out how to do that, and maybe they can't do that just with their own money, maybe there has to be some incentives involved in helping them build that so that their costs balance out, they would still have a reasonable or a pretty solid expectation that they could rent out 113 of those units being added to our housing stock every single year for the next 5 years. So those are kind of the key takeaways from that chart, right? Which is that we really do have rental demand for those 0, 1, or 2-bedroom units, and at relatively, reasonable price points, from that below 716 a month to the 700 to 14 a month. And then there's another blue square under there, 125. And that's another deep pocket sort of demand where you have that kind of higher $1,400 to $1,900 a month rent.
Can I ask? I'm curious because there's a lot of you in the room that are in community with folks looking for housing. Does that ring true for you? The 2-bedroom is a high demand, like that's what folks are looking for.
It is.
I would even say even 3 and 3 bedrooms. I know families that have a lot of kids that need more space.
I'm wondering, do you think
that's what
if they
I'm
choose
saying.
2-bedroom, is it for affordability? Like they like 3-bedroom?
We don't know. Oh, that's part of this. That's part of this conversation, right? Is to
Okay.
understand what we're looking for.
Yeah, a 2-bedroom right now on the south side, basically it's going for $1,000. And I mean, they're not actually even really livable. That's what people are asking for.
And there are people, yeah, but that's not in stone. I have a building, that's the park, and I don't ask that much for it. And 4 people are living there. It really just depends. And we're not just in it to make a profit. There needs to be that sense. And it can be done in a little city like that because we all know each other. I mean, when I was in DC, I didn't know them, but I know who was here. So you have to, as a landowner, as a landlord, you can determine the price of it.
Right. You know, everything I know about. I want to meet you too. So, if you got a family, yes, then that's gonna require. Me, so you got family there, and I have family here there. Yeah, totally. And I think they may have said from ice to stay.
My question.
Yep.
Like choosing two because that's what that's available with the.
Yep.
There's the three.
Yep.
Well, that's the
That's
And this is what we need to hear, right? Put a finer point on it. You know, it's one thing to crunch numbers, no value in that, but they're never going to be as accurate as hearings, right? So I appreciate all. I'm just trying to just get through the season of sustainable conversation.
Yeah, that's not just that. There's it's like of every restriction for only developer, which is saying here. Things like that, we only have two bedroom home. I know.
If you correct, it's an RFQ. That RFQ says this is the vision. Yeah, we've got data that the market supports this, and we'll work with you to get this built, but you have to prove to us this is what you're going to do, and this is what came to. So, and like I said, it's kind of turning things around to put you in the driver's seat and ensuring that because the city has to look pretty hard for that, and they just have to transfer that you can't make a solid case that this is going to be part of the bill that creates exactly that.
Wes is not allowed to talk. Wes is not allowed to talk.
That's killed. But there's, but they found like he got.
They are. It's not on. It's not on. It's too hard. Well, but it's good recording though. But you have to just hold your head. Yeah. I love them. I love them. Yeah. I have my old Ray-Bans, so because I couldn't find my sunglasses, and I love these too. I love Ray-Bans. It seems to be working now. There's 10 people in there watching it, so in my thing. So, and then millions will be watching it later. Fewer than millions. Fewer. Do you see Mr. Mayor in here? The new mayor, Dave? How can little kids find these hooks? Huh? Yeah, 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 yeah. You were so yesterday, Dora. How are little kids supposed to get up to these hooks?
That was spotted. So you can see there was some outliers. See that on the left-hand part, currents one. I mean, I know it would be much easier to have this whole presentation that we have there. Then you can look at what we actually have. Because that's exciting. Having done this other as we look at the same color. And again, that doesn't mean that this is what we're going to do. This is just they said it's so meaning other things are with them. I cannot. Fest and can have a great chance of raising or selling if that's what it's playing. We've got this man, that's playing for a living stuff. We got to have somebody that conceptual handles aspect of a lot more costs that goes to the equation of, hey, can I bounce at night on this site that will hurt for the site, and can I at least break even and then see and go get the full And it's just a really kind of mathematical equation to get spreadsheets for all of your costs, costs, all go and a date. Now you can set one of these up to input for you on it. But it'll tell you basically, am I going to be out of water? Am I going to lose my information, or am I going to make a benefit from this? And if so, how much? And it costs what's constantly fill in the gaps. More process. If it's within the vessel, this is how it works in the data way. And the visual.
The main takeaway on this sort of thing, with the market analysis, there's a structural conference today, a brand new 8-unit apartment building to sell at 850 square foot units. We're trying to get everybody loaded in that. We have units for that price. They're to make it possible.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. No, and that's a good example. That's what we have it up there, right? With no incentives, if I just have cash in my pocket and using what we know about Sandusky and those and I just took at least $1,480. And it's not because I want to have it. It's because it's getting with me right this even and making us money on that based on how expensive it is to finance things. Interest rates are significant these days, plastic materials, and all of those soft costs that are. So that's where some incentives make that rough price, that break-even price go down as the monthly price goes down. And then there's a line with income in that particular year. Okay, so I've kind of got, and we can kind of get into our. MacArthur established in the 1930s. Back to the World War II. Housing was our defensive security. And the space in the middle is no choice. And as you know, the city's made some significant investments and will continue to see something as pretty stable. But the city did really nice. And this was kind of interaction. Just leave the neighborhood problem.
I don't want to say 70s too. I'm talking about 60s, 70s. Oh, yes.
These are just some shots from Southside neighborhood plan. And out, we've read it. It's beautiful. And we want to thank for all of the souls that put in making that what it was. You don't want to do anything that constant isn't that's expressed in the plan. You've got a great story because this neighborhood now has a job. So that we had to take a look at the housing types that potential density for the south side. And then so they do a really nice blend of show down to 3,000. You can see them. It's not barely right in tiny flash cottage. Is that something that anyone's familiar with? Yeah. Is that something that you kind of find exciting? Like that? Made it into the outside, and they did a nice render. I think that's been that kind of that's a lot of the policy on part, right? So stuff is really tough on that.
Tim, do you?
In the last 10 years, relative to, open country housing stock, whatever was the definition. It kind of used the definition is about 7. And it's kind of the plant, the climate.
All the different ideas you guys might have.
I think the headline is they're going to build tiny homes.
In this place before, and just we've been studying this, both cooler and also trying and over the summer. We've done several trips and just making a living and trying to just see what the neighborhood looks like, what it feels like, and the type of home. Through unit system. In Los many of those lots, not also. But that building, like, that I'm going to say that's okay. Now, the buildings, though, that would require for that, we might say, boy, that doesn't fit with how we see our neighborhood. We're used to seeing these 1-story, duplexes, and it's got a lot more of a, less urban feel than other cities. So you might say, maybe we don't want that many units. Just because we can fit that many units physically or mathematically in there doesn't mean that's in line with the vision that was in the plan, the South Side plan, or what you all want to see.
So there's really no vision in mind then.
That's what we're.
That's why we're here.
We're building on.
Building it.
Let me give you a bit of see my past and
So wait, can you just go to the next slide?
This one?
No, just go to the visions questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
here's a vision. You know what the project part grew into, but the density it was for all those years. But here, I would like less density. Okay. Because chances of it becoming over time growing better. Planning as many people as you can on one piece of property doesn't work. It didn't work in your own city. Or reason it works here. So, everybody's gonna have their opinion. So, it's not even with all the space used up with people in it, and then take 15% off, and you not even worth it. But it'll probably be a balance. But it allows people to have a reasonable quality of life around folks living. This is
The reason I was asking because you get all the signs of affordable 150 units and this money, and I was asking, so how many units do you per plan to alleviate? I know you're not going to do a whole 150.
we say no. I'm not talking to you like I was.
You put this graph up and you say there's 150, you mean you desperately want 2 bedrooms. So is 40 going to come from the guys at the park? That's what I was wondering.
Exactly. Just because the citywide demand for a particular type of units, like we said, 150 in there, doesn't mean we have to build 150.
Correct. I understand that. Yeah.
I thought it's an 8-unit building precedent in here. I thought we had that to look at for everybody to look at. Is that part of the? Oh no,
I thought we put
it
it.
was in the previous one.
I thought it was in a previous one. That one.
No,
It's
it's
not
not
a-
the one from Cleveland. I was just curious what folks' reaction was to that, but I didn't see it.
I think maybe that got,
Okay, never mind.
sorry.
I think a good place to start with their vision exercise is maybe just let's talk about single family versus a duplex, triplex, and where does everyone kind of feel on that for these sites?
Well, I'm going to ask 2 questions and let's try to structure it. So I think we're doing good on time. We're 11:55. And so what we want to kind of do is frame the conversation. I'm kind of done talking. I'm just going to facilitate from now on. I want to kind of frame the conversation around those 2 questions. Hey, what generally would you like to see at if housing is developed on South Side sites? And really what we mean is on those particular sites in MacArthur Park. And then what frequently do you not want to see, again, if housing is developed on those particular sites? So the 2 things to kind of keep in mind is the things that you would like, kind of try to express them in general terms, because we don't want to get so specific that, we can't all agree on, I want, blue houses that look exactly like this, with a porch like that. We'll never get out of here. So we need to talk about generalities when we're thinking about positive things. I want to see tiny houses, or I want to see apartment building. When we talk about what we don't want to see, that's the deal breaker, right? That's the stuff that we can get tripped up on and never come to a consensus. And we want to build consensus. So the deal breakers need to be specific. What do you not want to see, right? If your deal breakers, I don't want to see a 3-story building. Or I don't want to see a 2-story building because there hasn't been one there before. Express it that way.
yeah, I know.
And then the jumping off points, and there could be anything. You've got way more thoughts and sentiments than, we can start with. But if you're looking for something to jump off on, building height, like I mentioned, character and feel. So that is, a brick building versus a building with, siding versus, some other type of architectural treatment. Connectivity, how those buildings might interact with the street, meaning are they kind of closer to the street? Do they even face the street or do they face the park? Those types of things. So I think that's kind of the preface for the discussion. I'll let you have the floor. Thanks.
Because I missed one of the meetings. I was late to it up one yesterday. Were tiny houses proposed at those sites as well? And are we trying to have different types of structures in different locations? Or we're going to have a combination of the various possibilities in all 3 locations as well?
How many tiny houses are in I, H, and J?
Well, I think
That one in the corner there.
I think the illustration in that plan, what they tried to do is they said these are all things that would be appropriate based on what we heard. Again, I'm speaking for the people that wrote the plans, but not us. But having read it, these are all things that we think would be appropriate based on what we heard. And then they just drew, this is a very generic example diagram. It doesn't actually mean we want to put tiny homes on that parcel specifically. This is just one vision that was sourced from what they heard.
My initial question was, were the tiny houses proposed on the other two? Because I missed part of the one, and that's the main thing I wanted to go.
We did not hear an interest in tiny houses in the other two.
No.
Okay.
And the idea is the reason why we're having 3 is because the context is different for each of the neighborhoods. So what does the neighborhood want to see? So what do you think? It's like, did the townhomes idea make some sense? Do folks think that those would fit in?
I'm agreeing with that one. The tiny homes, I think you're going to pile them in too close. I mean, you don't want to hear your neighbor burp. I mean, they play their TV too loud. I mean, it's.
What if they were spaced out rather than, because you got to think the city owns these lots and these lots are connected. So
I need more yard.
yeah, I mean, so if you were to take a whole, for example, on that map, what the ones on the left side, A, B, and C, and put those together and then distribute those houses over 3 lots. So there would be some more space between them. You could have like a little courtyard in the middle, and it would be, sometimes we call those cottage courts. Right? How do you feel about that? That's kind of what they're trying to show there. But again, that's a really simplified picture. It's not meant to be a design.
So you could do single family and some type of apartment buildings within townhouses within the park.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're not here to tell you no. I mean, if there's a mixture of things that you'd like to see on different sites, that's totally on the table.
The options are good.
One thing to consider is a single family home takes the most amount of land, whereas an apartment building takes the least amount of land. So should we balance the number of units or the amount of space? Because the more space you give folks, the more single family, that more expensive it gets and the fewer units we get out of it.
On the west side, it's mostly houses.
So I think both sides.
Yeah. So
I'm with you. I mean, I don't live in Southside, so with this, we work with a lot of the families in Southside. In the last 6 months, we worked with 280 families evicted and that cannot afford rent. And that's just 2 or 3 agencies. So when I look at a plan like this, I think my concerns are that there's a big difference in affordable and low income housing. And what we've seen across the city so far in low income is that we're looking at, again, $1,200 to $1,400 a month for rent they cannot afford. So I look at a thing like this and I wonder, does it make sense to put in prefab? What is the nicest that we can get families in that cost the less to make sure that the rent stays down? Because if we're putting in beautiful single family homes, we don't know what that means. That means everybody in that park, all of the property taxes are going to go up. All of them are not going to live there for very much longer. And so I think my fear in designing things here is to make sure that what comes in is affordable for the people that need to live there. I agree with that, but I also don't want to see a whole bunch of apartment buildings and just a lot of people thrown in on top of each other. So I don't know how to mix and match so that we have ownership. People that live there have ownership and want to be there and want to stay there and want to
So
the area to stay at.
So that's the problem that we have to solve, right? So we need to align our desire to not get too dense, because historically this hasn't been dense, but also come up with a solution that's absolutely what we said before, income aligned. That's exactly what you said, right? Affordable and yet not undesirable, right? We want it to be both affordable and something that's desirable for someone in part of the income spectrum. Yeah, sure. The overall segment. This one,
Along with the ladders you want to
yeah. Yep.
So at least for jumping off on it, one thing I see, I'm Adam Dennis, by the way, I work under Aaron with the city play. A, B, and C. What sticks out to me is I don't know. It's just a top-down view on the map. This is all, it looks single family. Maybe you could do some of that over here, but then the actual street facing side, it looks where those condos is 2 duplexes.
They're 2 and 4 unit rental.
Okay, so you could match part of that with this or the whole thing. If you did the whole thing, that would be like a middle ground. Could be with the number of units. It would be less 1, max 2 stories. You would think. That's what pops out to me. Just kind of going on what's already there by feel. That's most of what this is today. Because, like you said, if you put McMansions, then suddenly I can't afford my rent in 2 years. That's what we don't want. So
And then we don't.
that's just a jumping off point.
The other thing that I would think about also, even if we did do the apartments, and the apartments have like 4 units each, and them, you wouldn't want it more than that because it would come more population, more problems.
More
Yeah.
units, you got to go up.
Yes, right. Oh, so,
You don't have the room to sprawl outside to show not spinning.
right. No more. You can look at one of them. You don't know what to do. Right.
It's right. That's the way. And that
I've been damn.
she coming in and it's 30 hours.
Try to have one conversation at once. So the gentleman up front there, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Would you behind me? Start with
Is there any way you could probably get another survey out to maybe I'm just guessing, to Metro, to probably more of the people who are really probably going to live in MacArthur Park? Because I would guess to say it's a good percentage, a big percentage of the ones here aren't going to live there. And so if you could get their, they're not here, and they probably won't come to the next one, and they probably won't come to the next one after that. So that you somehow to work with whoever
I
else,
think I get what you're saying. So
work with my friend. See what else doing.
sometimes the art for this, or how it's sometimes talked about, is whether you own or rent. So in like a couple other workshops that we did, people really wanted to see home ownership and not alone. Oak Creek was that way. Oak Creek's the difference. Which is why we're having a different meeting. We're different.
I think
Way different meeting.
yes.
But anyway,
Well, I own my golf.
and that's great.
Yeah.
So do we want to see, are we okay with the rentals? Because that's to your point. That's a different population. Because I think Metro's all around.
I think that's it. But let's bring it.
Yeah, the number don't move. I think the majority of the people don't remain out to MacArthur Park are rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Just see where C's at in that corner there. We from there around the corner, we all own.
Can we hear? You hear?
Okay.
Yeah, right.
So
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, you had this game on my point.
okay, like Mike's house and at my house. What's all that?
Can we give the floor so that make sure everyone can be heard, please?
Okay, in MacArthur Park, we have a lot of people that have lived there for years and they want to remain. But we have, and they're older people and they're renting and their place like that. But we have people that would go out there and live out there if we had decent housing for the elderly. All elderly people don't want to live up in the high rises. If we could put something out there for them, 1 story, 2 bedrooms, washer and dryer, access, a front porch. I remember when we did our survey, it was people want a community. They want to have a place where people feel loved and warm and you can come together. Put a front porch out there where people can go back to being neighbors and communicate with one another. That was what we were saying when we first started this years ago. And people still want that. They want to have a sense of being able to be neighbors again, because at a lot of these apartment buildings, they don't even know one another. They don't never come out, sit up, hey, come on up on the porch, have a cup of lemonade or something. They don't do that, but that's what people said they wanted. They wanted to have a community, so if we put 3-story buildings out there, that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Because
I got a follow-up question if I can. So when you said elderly people want to, serving our seniors says it as aging in place. I think that's very well put.
Yeah.
To enable that, do you think there should be an option just in the future to let me rephrase this. when people that live there right now, let's say the elderly living there right now, do you think they have family members that if they could move into the house, either rent or own, and then it's like a tiny home out back? Is that something you could see working? I mean, it's economical, but that's why we're here. That doesn't necessarily mean that's a good fit.
Could you have their recipe?
Because right now we don't really have that option in the zoning code. That's down the line, but just figuring out that because that leads to a little different feel too.
I just think that
Just
whatever we
definitely
got there, we need to bring back the sense of community,
Yeah.
people being neighbors again, because it's a beautiful place.
It can be.
Yes. And when you look at it, the way it's structured, it could be so nice. We've got a beautiful park out there now. There's so many things that we could do. We have a place where you can have programming, things going on. We got plans for the park, but you just got to have the right people around there living and wanting to do things.
Yeah.
Years ago, we had kids that, when I was doing a park program out there, we had kids that lived out there that actually came and cleaned up the park before we started our program every day. They would come out because that's what they wanted. They wanted to have a nice place. They had a place to come to, a place where they felt safe, somewhere people could come. We had parents come out, grandparents that would come out with kids. They want a community.
Great. Thank you. That's a great answer to that first question, being positive, but also general at the same
Yeah.
time. And ma'am in the back.
Yes. The when you get the developer that comes in, what we really need is that the community is a part of the development, not an outside developer that comes in and they build. It needs to be something where the people that are going to live there actually own there. We're the development company. I guess there's community development associations that happen so that they're not renters just moving in into places that an outside developer has come in and put up. They are like when Sunnyside Acres was built 1,000 years ago. We own the property, we own the building there, and the community worked together to build it, and that's why it's a close-knit community. But if you have you sell the lots to an outside developer, they come in, they put up, and then they're making the profit off of the people that live there, rather than the people that live there own that land, own the house that they're in. So they're basically paying themselves rather than paying somebody outside.
Are you saying some owner occupied would be desirable within the whole mix of whatever goes in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. And there have been models. There have been models for that.
Yeah.
Development models that have worked. I'm not super expert in them, but that's absolutely an avenue we can look into in terms of charting a path forward rather than just the traditional route of selecting one developer.
That's a follow-up question. I'm sorry, I don't mean to steal the time. What do you think? So the ownership is just that, it's ownership, but in terms of what it looks like you could own a townhome, or people think of condos. Just come up the other workshop, but a condo is actually just a type of ownership, whereas we think of a type of building, has become associated with that. So, are you thinking, or the room would thinking in terms of people came in here, built something, owned it? Would you guys be okay if that were, I don't know, like the Chesapeake? Not that big, right? But the concept, smaller building, or would you want to see a house like say like traditional residence?
Well, Jen lives out there, so would you bet someone own the house? If that, and they
Be okay with either?
and they're part of the community. Yeah, I would be okay with either. I really want to see that people that live in Sandusky actually own MacArthur Park. And when that ownership comes in, the pride comes in, and the feeling of being in a neighborhood. I see MacArthur Park as being, but this is just me, another Martha's Vineyard. I mean, Sandusky has everything that Martha's Vineyard has. We have water and grass and boats and a marina, and and the setting. So why not have that same kind of atmosphere where we own the MacArthur Park area? The city of Sandusky sells a group the land and allow us to develop it. to bring in a developer for that.
So a cooperative development fund.
There you go.
So let's take a look at that. I'm sure. Okay, you've had your hand up for a while.
So I didn't go to the DNC found you. What type of housing needs to be built out there?
Well,
I mean, according to these meetings.
what we can talk about that more. I don't want to take too much time.
Yeah, just okay.
But
Why
it was,
isn't there? This is a huge plot of land. Why the tiny homes never even came up?
I think we brushed on a little bit, but I
Yeah.
think it was really more of a mix, right? Kind of a mixed use building along with some townhomes, along with maybe some single family units, all kind of mixed in kind of a grid setting. So we got a lot of great ideas out of that workshop that we'll be noodling on and refining over the next 3 months.
And there'll be a second meeting on both areas. There'll be communication about them throughout the process too.
Yeah,
I'm going to suggest that it likes in favor of mixed use because we have a mixed use tonight, and everybody needs a house as an home. So it's nice to advocate for those both, but it's not necessary. May I suggest that specific plots A, B, and C, start the conversation, would be single family home. Why? Because you got, in the long run, Mr. Dusty, would you like more and more people own single family homes? So let's start then. It's in a location that is backed up by single family homes behind it. People that are here currently own properties to the left and right of America are single owners. And it doesn't matter. All you have to do is decide how big a place you're going to put in that space, how many, and then find 5 people to buy it. I'd like to think you immediately that we can do that. And likewise around the rest of these plots, just say what we want this to look like and how would it work and how we infill it when these people die and
Okay, so
it's simply good enough for that.
So follow up on the single family. For A, B, and C, those 3 parcels are almost a half acre.
Sure.
And if you kind of look, it's faded out, but if you look right to the left on Carl Ann, you can see how much smaller those lots are.
Mhm.
So are you indicating just 3 houses on 3 big lots or subdividing that into smaller lots with smaller individual houses?
Yeah, that's common sense.
Okay.
We're trying to get a decent quality of life to as many people as we can, with long-term they can stay in it because they own it and grow wealth. And so, yeah, the math of how many what to do, you figure that out later. But you start with the concept of what you want, what you're trying to accomplish. It's not what you, that's what I want to accomplish.
With the city building, I was going to say something about the zoning, but you also, I don't mean to be rude, but point my finger. But you also made a point about tiny homes being behind bigger homes. Would the city be opposed to taking that to the zoning board? Because that could possibly work. Because you could probably kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone. You could have a family member who wants the home living in the home, and then maybe another family member, a close friend of the family member, living behind in the tiny home.
Right. Yeah, so that is something that is called accessory dwelling unit or ADU, meaning like a smaller unit or just another unit on a property, not necessarily a duplex in one building, but it can be. It could be a garage that was turned into a home, right? So the idea there, and that's an interesting concept because if you look to the left, you'd fit 7. If you take the Carl Ann Drive lots and put those on Forest, you could fit 7 single family homes there. So 7 families have a home.
Okay.
If you put accessory dwelling units behind those as part of that development configuration, all of a sudden you've got 14 units. Maybe you have a family in the bigger one and you got a mother-in-law, grandma's behind, right? So that's more families, more individuals that have a house at the end of the day. If you put 3 6-unit apartment buildings, you have 18 families that can find a home. So, we only have so much land, and that's part of what we're trying to get to. And I wonder what if there was, I'll stop there.
But and does it necessarily have to be a family member that would stay in the back?
We don't have any regulation on that, so we can decide as that moves through the process. I will say that the Planning Commission has directed staff to study accessory dwelling units and look for legislative answers to that. And we expect, I hope that that's part of what we do in this office as well.
Karen, can an accessory dwelling unit also be thought of as having its own parcel? So if I am a single person who would like to own a smaller home like that, kind of like an unattached apartment, could it have its own deed to that accessory?
That could just make it a single family.
Then it's just a tiny
Like it
house.
could just almost be a tiny home. I think sometimes there's a stigma about the concept of a tiny home.
Right.
And so people think of like, tiny home like you've all seen on TV where but a tiny home could simply be, if you think of an apartment, a small apartment, that could be someone that's a senior citizen, someone that has mental health issues, someone that has developmental disability, but is supported by their community in a smaller, unattached, so they're not disrupting other people. Maybe they're
Let me say one thing that we get the floor, man.
Okay.
So when you talk about tiny homes, how many people are familiar with the Sears catalog, right? From back in the day, Sears, it wasn't just clothes and stuff. You could buy houses once upon a time in the Sears catalog. You can Google these, find them online. What houses they offered many that were 600, 700 square feet, that the ones that have survived up to this day are highly sought after because they had really, high quality materials, unique architecture, and yet they fit really well into neighborhoods with lots more expensive houses. But, people just starting out could afford them back then. Of course, they built them themselves. But the idea is you can do that with a small floor plate or, what we're calling kind of tiny home, where I'm saying, in my mind, 600, 750 square feet. Not what we see on those HGTV shows where it's like, I'm going to build this little cabinet into a house with, 5 bedrooms. I want to make absolutely clear that's not what in our industry we're talking about with tiny homes. And go ahead.
They're talking about, they still have them in Columbus and Glass Historical Center, and they're still on site for people to view and to walk through to see that tiny. They're really just for modest homes. They have a lot of amenities. Now, kind of going back to what Wes said, and I heard kind of reiterated several different ways here as well as the other one that I was at. Okay, remember that it's a multi-home type dwelling that we're kind of considering here for all of that. Because some people want to be renters. For whatever reason, people want to be renters. Now, a lot of us want to push the whole buy a house, own a house, but everybody doesn't want that for their own reasons. So we have to have housing because we do need housing for renters as well as people who are wanting to buy and renting to own. But the only thing is that I'm kind of worried about basically, especially what you said was those are concerns having grown up in Columbus and seeing a lot of neighborhoods change, that we might almost have to have some type of education about what is the difference between home ownership and rentership, because it is different. And the responsibility involved is different. And sometimes people go into a situation and they don't realize how much is involved and they get in it and then they lose their home because they can't keep it up or what have you. So part of what we're looking at might have to involve the potential of people needing homes, giving input and maybe taking a class to see what's the difference in rentership versus home ownership. What does that entail? Or do you have the mindset for home ownership? You have a mindset to be a good renter. I mean, because there are good renters, and kind of sometimes give renters a bad name, but there's a lot of people who are renting them good tenants. And then we've got some people who try to own and they're not up to the task. And then that property falls by the wayside and it kind of damages a lot of where people are living. But I love the whole thing of what you said about the whole front porch, because I have them put on my house in my neighborhood. And I love the porch. And that whole sense of community, people sometimes want that. But then on the other hand, some people just want to be left alone. They want to have a place to live that's safe, but they don't really want to intermingle with people. So there's a lot to consider.
All right, well said.
It's just that it just occurred to me that you said that 60% of the housing in Sandusky is already rent. So whether we put rent
less than that. It's about 47.
out there, thought 47, it doesn't matter. It's we said call it 50, it doesn't matter. The point is, handing over these little parcels over unique rentals because people can't find rentals. It doesn't, it's not a good idea. Just discussion. What do we want the city of Sandusky to be like? What kind of life do you want? What kind of life can I have in that little plot, 18 people living? When you go with this rental concept, where are we trying to go? For those folks that she's talking about that just want to be alone, they go to the township.
one of those other 47% of things. You should be thinking about what would make these folks who live there have a nice quality of life. Anybody in here got 18 feet that living out cramped up like that purposely? No. So now let's visualize that there's all kinds of places to live all over your county. What do you want this to be turned into from what it is has been for years? And just talk about it that way.
Next to
You have to argue. Yeah, and tiny homes are fine. You just make it the right size, in the right space, but it's based on a vision of if I live in this tiny home and 700 square feet, you nice, like good size. You can live decently in it. Then all we have to decide is how much space do we need in that group of people for them to interact well and have a good life. Period. Yeah, I'll just shut up. I'm not interested in cramming people in just because I know 16 people today that need a place to live. Therefore, I have to do this, and now we're stuck with it forever. Just throw it out of your head and say, city, get on board, change the zoning, or whatever it is to make what we're trying to do for our community, that community that whoever talked about. I'm done with it.
Ma'am.
I would like to say, and I take into consideration what everyone's saying. I've been privy not to have to live in apartment buildings and homes such as this, the MacArthur Park neighborhood and stuff like that. But even though I've been able to live in homes where I was buying the house or whatever, you stop and think about what is going on in congested apartment buildings today. Sandusky really don't need that. Okay. What they actually do need, I go back to what she said, a sense of being able to sit on your front porch and you have one or two neighbors or 3 or 4 neighbors around you that you guys your own little community. When you got 30, 40 apartment buildings or even 8 apartment buildings, let me put it that way, 8 apartment buildings, and you got children running all around everywhere of different ages and everything. In today's energy, today's energy, that's just too many people together. So we have to look at from a safety aspect when we start thinking about what we're going to build. Do we need a lot of space? No, we don't, because even with some of the older, bigger houses, the older you get, the less room you need. Yes. The older you get, the less room you need. Taking myself, I got a 4-bedroom home. I never make it upstairs.
Right.
Okay. So you don't want that 2-level house. And I remember you said it's 40% rental. I remember years ago when we had 51% rental in Sandusky. Okay. And I'm pretty sure MacArthur Park was a part of that. Okay. There is nothing wrong with renting the rental house. My thing is that do we have the jobs to support the houses that we're thinking about building here? Do we have? Evidently not. Because if we did have, even for the numbers that you have put up there, we still don't have the average, I'm saying average, income to pay for these houses that we're talking about building here today.
You're right.
what his survey said you can.
I mean, from the minute I saw the survey,
It said it did.
it's saying that the survey is off.
All the surveys are.
The survey is off.
And everything's going to happen.
No, he just.
You got Perkins Township and everything. You can't tell me that it's not added into your survey.
He said it was.
What he says.
What we're looking at, where incomes are versus what types of houses we have.
The income don't support what you're talking about.
I think it's more of a question of, it doesn't really take into account the specific types, right? It's looking at one unit equal to another unit, right? Whether that's a real unit in an individual house that somebody else owns or a larger apartment building or anything like that. And those have been built over 50 years or more under zoning rules that really prevent a lot of other things that people desire to ever get built in the first place. And so they were never added. So that's kind of what we were trying to communicate, is really more that there's just this mismatch between the types of people based on their income who live in the city versus what we have. Right. So, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind this overall thing, is to try and change that paradigm.
And
You know,
a home, and then you have a tiny home behind it. How the amenities, the utilities, gas, light, and water, 2 different units. That's something else to think about.
And how do you get to
You know,
it? It's not
right.
family.
Right.
Would almost
Gonna-
have to be like a townhouse.
You probably have separate
That
meters.
builds the rent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's not a foreign concept.
That-
enough communities are starting, not a lot, but enough, especially around this state, are starting to open their minds to ADUs, that is really getting sorted out in terms of just the mechanics of, like utility billing and utility hookups and stuff like that. That's not really a deal breaker. That's the route we want to go down.
And was your question answered as to what else was at the meeting yesterday, either for what type of houses would be out at the GNC?
I think where we're going to go and bring back in February, and I hope you can, I know it's tough, but I hope you can make it in February to the second workshop for that one as well. What Rick started to draw was kind of a mixed use building, multiple stories. We were actually surprised that there was an appetite for them to go up 4 or 5 stories, but that wouldn't be the entire site. It wouldn't be just like one building or one big group of buildings overwhelming that site. It might be one building like that on the corner, and then filling that in and making it more like the surrounding neighborhood streets. So actually building in a grid of streets, filling it in with potentially a mixture of product like townhomes and such.
Do you have those dates with you right now for both McGuffey Forest, Cold Creek, as well as
We have not put those dates set in stone yet. We're going to kind of wait for the holidays and the new year. And then, yes, absolutely, we're going to get them on the calendar. If you signed in at this workshop today, and if you haven't, please do before you leave, or any of the other workshops, we've got your email, or you can always call Erin and she'll give you the information directly. But we'll make sure to email that out and 6 weeks in advance so that you can get those dates on the calendar for that second round of 3 workshops. We're aiming for February. And that's kind of the worst part of the year in terms of weather and wanting to get out of the house. So maybe March, but at the same time, we don't want to drag this out, for more time, people lose patience and interest and stuff.
So I have a question and then I'm done. I'm asking Jen because I know she lives in the area. What would you think about single family and duplex or triplexes in the area? Or would
No, triplexes, not. Now we keep the aesthetics of the park there, so nothing is 3 stories high.
what about this way?
Right.
Why?
Yeah, why to take up the lot like the 4 units that are there now?
And most of them are quad.
Yeah,
We can still always do a 2-story home, and it can have 2 people in the front and 1 in the back. So I think does it matter more how many units there are, or just that the vernacular of the building matches what's happening currently?
The building that the building matches what's happening.
Yes,
What's happening in the system.
2 or 3 or 4 max. That doesn't matter.
No.
To me.
I want to add something. So I grew up on the South Side, and I remember, this is when you talk about multi. What you talking about? Just I'm asking questions. I got a statement. It's not funny. So when I think about the community, when I think about how I grew up, there was a senior couple that lived on the corner that didn't like kids. They all mom. We knew that couple. We had a family, but my family was just me and my brother. Across the street was another family that had 9 kids. Right here was a single person working. It was a mixture, and that was the community that I got my muscle from. So I don't know when you talk about what you don't want, and everything needs to be one type of thing. I think we're so diverse in this community that we need a space, and everybody gonna know where to fit in. They know where their lane is. If you put something in that corner, I mean, I ain't going over here in this people's yard because they don't like kids. Mhm. And if you don't like kids, then you don't want to move. You ain't gonna move over here. Like you, clearly, I'm just what I got. You don't. I mean, I ain't saying you don't like kids, but
I don't.
you brought up. I got that vibe.
I have
And
three,
so,
but I don't.
but if I was to buy a unit, that's where the kids would be. It'd be a bunch of kids where I'm at. So you probably wouldn't want to live by me. Right? So I just want to make a statement.
Sunnyside Acres.
Huh?
Think more Sunnyside Acres where every house is the
Look
same.
the same and
Same.
same layout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I grew up.
Right.
So, there's room for everybody and everything, but I'm thinking more of whatever style the house is, that it has to be a community flavor.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question. One of the slides I was hoping to show you is a 3-story building that they're building in Cleveland. And it looks like a Queen Anne. You know, that kind of.
I'm going to find it.
So, like, it looks like a big old house, like something you find on Columbus Avenue, like a big old house built in 1910. That's what it looks like, and it's got balconies on every floor. It's got a big front porch. It's actually an 8-unit apartment building, and each of those units has a front porch. It has a balcony. It has outdoor space. They can wave to the kids walking, the neighborhood way, and it's a 3-story building. And I'm curious if that, like, kind of architecture style could answer to community, but it would be like taller. Most of the stuff is 1 story. Like, what's your reaction to an idea of something like that?
That would go perfect on Monroe Street with GNC boundary.
Or even like a scaled out house, like a 2-story version that fit more units, but like everybody had a quality of space. Like, I'm curious what you might think about.
You find the picture?
If I have an internet password, we can get it up.
It's Streaky Bear, capital F.
The Sandusky, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Streaky Bear, capital S, one word, and exclamation point.
I got to figure out Julie's. Okay. I mean, keep going.
Yeah, put a finish to that. Anybody thoughts?
Not 3 stories, though.
Oh, 3 stories. So the height feels too high.
2 stories would be nice.
2 stories.
Two, yeah.
But that it's so crummy that Monroe Street.
And
GNC
built. It'd be as last.
Yeah. And it's interesting your reaction to that would be appropriate on Monroe is that usually taller buildings are on faster travel corridors. So where you have cars moving faster, that's where taller buildings tend to be more accepted, more appropriate. They feel better when you're.
So different stuff have to be integrated into different projects at different times, because with, say, the next 50 years, the buildings that are there now where people are living, they probably won't be there any longer. Those will be the ones that'll be empty lots. There are more that are going to go. So when you start integrating, just integrate a little bit at a time, then something that is familiar, and then maybe a couple of houses down later, you build another one, and then around that, make something that is familiar, because we know that being here as long as I've been in Ohio, that the buildings are going to deteriorate and they're going to come down. Okay, and something else going to go up. So then you start a little old and a new added to the old, and sooner or later, you have what you want.
Yeah.
Might take 100 years to get there, but sooner or later, you will have a better structure than what you had back in the 1900s, and so on and so on. So it wouldn't be a true method. But I don't want to leave the feeling that I don't like kids. I don't want kids because mines are grown, but I don't want nobody messing with the kids either.
I'm glad you could have. I'll do it.
Just say I don't, but I do.
You do.